Let's look at how to make a fully working Hangman game in Unity. So, first we're going to want to create a new Unity project. I'm going to use the 2D template and I'm going to be calling it Hangman. Once your project has created, you're going to want to drag in the two assets which I have included in the description of this video. This should be face and head.png. So next I'm going to go to the game window, and where it says free aspect, I'm actually going to change this. I'm going to click the plus, and then I'm going to click aspect ratio, and then I'm going to do 9:16. Now I've already got this, so I'm just going to click this one that I've created here, and as you can see it makes it into a phone resolution. That is because the game we're creating takes the size of a phone window. So next I'm going to go to the main camera, and I'm going to go to the background. I'm actually going to change this, and we're going to make it a nice sort of blue colour. Once I've done this, I'm going to right click in our hierarchy, and I'm going to go to UI, and I'm going to create a button -text mesh pro. Now when you do this, you're going to get a TMP importer. You're going to want to import the text mesh pro essentials, and we're not going to bother with the text mesh pro examples and extras. So once we've done that, if we zoom out, we can see now our canvas, and we can see a button in the bottom left. I'm going to rename this into a keyboard button, and I'm going to go to the size, and I'm going to make this 100 by 100. I'm then going to center it on the X and the Y just so we can see it properly. I'm going to open the arrow on the side, go to the child, and we'll see text and then in brackets TMP. I'm going to remove that so it just says text, and then where it says button here, I'm just going to change this to a hashtag. This is so that I can sort of understand what the sizing will be, as this is going to be sort of all our buttons from A all the way to Z that we can input into our game. So now I'm going to go to font size, and I'm going to check auto sizer, and I'm going to have the max size as 100 and the minimum as 72. I'm then going to go to font style, and I'm going to make it bold, just like this. From here, I'm then going to go to keyboard button again, and on the button section in the inspector, I'm going to go to the on-click area. We're going to add a new event, and in this event, we're going to just drag the keyboard button in. We're going to go to where it says no function, click the drop down, go to button, and we're going to do bool interactable, and it should be unticked. So now if we were to just play the game, you'll notice if we click the button, it will become inactive. That's the intended effect we want. So once you've done this, drag your keyboard button into your assets folder, and then we can simply remove this from our game. So next I'm going to go to the hierarchy, I'm going to go to canvas, I'm going to go to create empty, and I'm going to call this letter container. I'm then going to go to the inspector, and I'm going to check that its width and height are 100 and its position is centered, so 0, 0, 0. I'm then going to right click letter container, I'm going to go to UI, I'm going to add an image, and this is going to be called underline. I'm then going to change the width to about 80. I'm going to change the height to about 20 or more like 10. And then I'm going to drag it down until it snaps to the bottom here, which should be -45. So if you just want to copy the values here, pause X is 0, Y is -45, Z is 0, width is 80, and height is 10. I'm then going to right click the letter container again, go to UI, and I'm going to add text mesh pro. I'm then going to call this just text. I'm then going to change the width to 100, the height to 100, and I'm going to go to the alignment in the text mesh pro area, and I'm going to center it on both pieces. I'm then going to again put a hashtag here just so that we can see it as a placeholder. I'm going to click auto size, and the max is going to be 100, minimum is going to be 72, and again I'm going to make this bold. Once again, we're going to go to the letter container in our hierarchy, and we're going to drag it into our assets folder and then delete it from our scene. Finally, I'm going to go back to the letter container prefab, and I'm going to change the scale to 0.5 on all 3 axes. We've now created all the prefabs we need, so let's start designing the scene. Go to the canvas, I'm going to right click, add a UI element which is an image, and then I'm going to call this word container. I'm going to change the height to 50, and then I'm going to go to match each side on the image to our canvas so that it stretches across the entire game. I'm then going to go pause Y, I'm going to change that to 100, and then here, these little triangles, I'm going to drag them into the corners as well of our sort of image. Next I'm going to go color, I'm going to go to the alpha, and I'm going to change that to 50. and I'm going to add a horizontal layout group. Now in our horizontal layout group, we're going to change the alignment to the middle center, and then we're also going to go to where it says child force expand, and we're going to untick those and use child scale instead. Now if I go to letter container and I add these to our word container, you can see they are perfectly adding dynamically to the middle. This means no matter the length of our word, it will create it perfectly. So now let's right click our canvas, create an empty, and I'm going to call this keyboard container. I'm going to drag each corner into the bottom corner and then the top into the top corner but below our word container as follows. And then I'm going to do the same for these triangles, which help it sort of align for if the scale is different. In keyboard container, I'm going to want to add a grid layout group, and then I'm going to want to affect the padding and make the padding 50 for each, and then cell size 50, and then start corner upper left, start axis horizontal, child alignment upper left, and then constraint flexible. So now if I was to add keyboard buttons into our keyboard container, you can see they dynamically add as intended. However, they're very close. So let's go to keyboard container and let's increase the spacing to around 25 on the X and Y. So now if I add it into the keyboard container, we can see they're more spaced out. Of course, you can change this as you require. Now the last thing we're going to create is we're going to create the Hangman container. So we're going to go to the canvas, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to create another empty. Now this one we're going to drag up, and we're going to drag along here, so that it's taking up the entire top portion from above our word container. Again, I'm going to do the same for the triangles, which help, of course, pivot it. I'm going to call this our Hangman container, as this is where our hangman will be. In this, I'm going to create an empty, and I'm going to call this permanent. Now, this is going to be sort of the permanent part of our hangman, which won't change depending on how many sort of incorrect letters they've had. Now, to do this, I'm going to have 6 stages, and that will be, of course, the different parts of the hangman body. And then the permanent will be sort of the bit where the player hangs from. So let's do that now. In permanent, I'm going to right click, I'm going to add a UI element, and that's going to be an image. Now for this, I'm going to change the height to about 20, and I'm going to sort of move this into a position where I feel it fits. I'm then going to call this sort of the bottom. I'm then going to Control C and then Control D to duplicate it, and I'm going to call this the pole. I'm going to change the width to about 20, and I'm going to change the height to about 200. I'm then going to increase the position on the y-axis to around about there, and I'm going to drag it on the x to around about there. Next, I'm going to again duplicate the bottom, and I'm going to call this the top, and I'm going to increase it on the y. I'm going to make that about 85, and then on the x I'm going to drag it across to around about -29. And now I'm also going to duplicate the top, and I'm going to call this support, and then I'm going to go to the rotation on the Z and put that as 45, and then make the width around about 50 or more 75. And then I'm going to drag this again into a position in which I feel feels correct. Finally, I'm going to duplicate the pole, and I'm going to call this the rope. I'm going to change the width to around 5, and then I'm going to change the height to around 50. And then I'm going to drag this out again and put it around here. Now I'm going to create a new empty, and I'm going to call this stage 1. So in stage 1, I'm going to create again a UI element, and I'm going to create an image. And now I'm not going to do anything yet. I'm going to drag the head sprite that I've created and attached in the description below, and I'm going to put that into the source image. And now this is quite big, so I'm going to change the width to 50. I'm going to change the height to 50. And then I'm going to move this into a position which feels correct. So around about there. So that's my stage 1. I'm now going to create another empty, and I'm going to call this stage 2. So in stage 2, I'm going to do the body. So I'm going to add another UI element. This is going to be an image, and I'm just going to call this body. Then I'm going to make the width 10, and I'm going to make the height about 50. So now I'm going to drag this into the correct position, which is around about here. Of course, if you're doing this, you might want to make it a bit more accurate and position it more correctly so that it looks nicer. But for the tutorial, I'm not going to bother with that. Now I'm going to create a new stage. This will be, of course, stage 3. So I'm going to create an empty, and I'm going to call this stage 3. This is going to be one of the arms. So let's go to UI. Again, image. I'm going to create arm, and this is going to be the arm on the right. So I'll just call this arm right. And the width is going to be about 10 again, or well, let's make it a bit smaller, so 7.5. And the height will be about 25, or we could do maybe 40. Now on the Z, I'm going to change the rotation to about -30, or, 30. And then I'm going to position this so that it is at a place where we'd want the arm. Now for stage 4, I'm actually just going to duplicate stage 3. I'm going to change the name to stage 4. And then I'm simply going to go to the arm, change it to arm left, and then change the rotation to -30 and move the object. Finally, we want to add the legs. So again, I'm going to go Hangman Container, create empty, and this is going to be stage 5. In stage 5, I'm going to, of course, again, do image. I'm going to call this leg. I'm then going to go to the width, make it about 7.5, go to the height, and let's make this about 50. Then again, let's make the Z 30, and let's just move this all the way down here. Then for stage 6, again, I'll duplicate stage 5, call it stage 6. This time, I will make the Z -30, and then I will simply move it over. Finally, for stage 6, I'm going to add a UI element image, and I'm going to call this the face. You can add this in your final stage, whatever that is. However, of course, mine is stage 6. So I'm going to put that into the source image, and I'm going to again make the width 50 and the height 50. And then I'm going to position that into the head. So now when the player dies, you can sort of visually see they are dead. So now finally, I'm going to just close the canvas, and I'm going to create a new empty, and I'm going to call this the Hangman Manager. I'm going to make sure this is centered on the X, Y, and Z, and then I'm going to add a component. Now I'm going to type Hangman Controller, and then I'm going to click New Script and create an add. And that'll create the C# script for us, as well as create the sort of it in the inspector. So let's open the script we've just created. We're going to need 6 different variables which are going to use a keyword called serialized field. Now this essentially means we can use a private variable through the Unity inspector, and we don't have to have it as public, meaning other scripts still can't access it. So the first variable we're going to want to do is a game object, and this is going to be called our word container. Next we're going to want to do it again, and we're going to another game object, and this time it's going to be called keyboard container. The next one we're going to want to do is again a game object, and this time we're going to be calling it letter container. The next one is going to be an array of game objects, and this is going to be called our Hangman stages. Next we're going to want another game object, and this is going to be our letter button. The final one we're going to want is a text asset. Now this is going to be our possible words list. So this will be sort of the list of words which will be possible to come up in our game. Next we're going to define a private string, and this is going to be called word. This will hold sort of the data for which word is currently active, which word we're trying to guess. And then we're going to want 2 private integers. We're going to want incorrect guesses, and we're going to want correct guesses. Next we're going to want to get rid of the update function because this will not be used at all, and I'm just going to get rid of the comment above the start. We're not going to touch start yet, however we will later. The first thing I'm going to create is a private void, and this is going to be called Initialize buttons. In this we're going to have a for loop, and this is going to go from int I equals 65 colon, I is smaller than or equal to 90 semicolon, I plus plus. Now the reason we've done this is because in ASCII a capital A has the denary value of 65, a capital Z has the denary value of 90, and of course B would be 66, C would be 67. So by doing the for loop with these values, it means we're going to go through the alphabet. So we can generate a keyboard from A to Z without us having to manually type A, B, C, D. It can do it for us. So in this, we're going to want to call a function. Now, let's create that function. We're going to do a private void create button. And this is going to pass through an integer, and we'll just call this I. So let's call this here. We'll do create button, and then we'll just put I. In this function, we're going to want to add a game object. We'll call this temp because it doesn't matter too much. And that's going to be an instantiated version of our letter button. And this is going to be instantiated in our keyboard container.transform. Now, if you want more information on how to instantiate objects like this, you can use the tutorial which is on screen now and also in the description, as this is taken from our tutorial on how to sort of have a dynamic scroll rect. The next thing we're going to want to do is do temp.getComponentsInChildren, and we're going to want to get text mesh pro UGUI. Now we're going to want to do the .text, and we're going to want to equal this to bracket bracket car close bracket I close bracket dot toString open bracket close bracket semicolon. What this is doing is it's getting the value I, so say this is 65, it's returning the character value of 65 in ASCII. So that is of course equal to a capital A. And now that's returning as a car value, or like a character. However, the .text takes in only strings, so we're then converting it to a string. Now, before we do the next line, we're going to need to create yet another function. This function is going to be called private void check letter. Now this is going to take in a string, and this will be input letter. So let's now do the next line and create button. We'll do temp.getComponent button .onClick .addListener, and now we're going to want to be very specific in what we type. We're going to want to type delegate space curly brackets and then check letter, and then we're going to pass through what we've typed here. So let's just copy this, put a bracket, paste, close bracket, semicolon, and then we'll put a semicolon at the end here. Now this is important to make sure that you've typed exactly what I have here, as of course there are a lot of brackets. Now let's do the check letter function. First we're going to want to define a boolean, and we're going to have this as letter in word, and we're going to define this as false originally. What this function is going to do is identify if the letter we have currently selected is in the word. And now what this does is it adds this sort of parameter to the button, so when we press the button it's going to call this function with the value on the button. So if it was A, it would pass through A, if it was B, it would pass through B. So going back to the check letter function, we're going to want to add a for loop, and this is going to be an int I equals 0 semicolon. I is smaller than word.length, and then I plus plus. In this, we're then going to want to do if input letter equals word I dot toString, because that gets a character value. Then we're going to do this. So essentially what this is going to do is it's going to go through each letter in our word, and it's going to compare it to the letter we've inputted. If it is in the word, then this if statement is going to call. So we want to make the letter in word variable to true. We're also going to want to do correct guesses plus plus, therefore adding 1 to the correct guesses integer. And then we're going to want to do word container dot get components in children, sorry, the plural, text mesh pro UGUI, and then we're going to want in square brackets I dot text equals input letter. And what this is going to do is it's going to, depending on which letter in the word we've gotten correct, it's going to represent that on our screen so we can visually see what word we have gotten correct. We're now going to want to do another if statement, and this is going to be if the letter in word equals false. So this essentially means if this hasn't been called at all, the letter isn't in the word, so we want to do incorrect guesses plus plus, therefore adding 1 to incorrect guesses. And we're also going to want to do hangman stages, and then in brackets we'll do incorrect guesses minus 1, because of course arrays start from 0 instead of 1. Dot set active true. And what that's going to do is, in our array hangman stages, it's going to find the corresponding incorrect stage, and it's going to display that so we can see how far our hangman is to losing. Now, at the end of this function, we're going to want to check the outcome. To do this, we're going to create a new function. This is going to be a private void, and we'll call it check outcome. Before we forget, let's add that here as check outcome. So, in the check outcome, we need to identify if there's a win or if there's a lose. So let's do that. If we do if correct guesses equals word.length, therefore we've correctly guessed each letter in the word, which means we've of course won. We want to now display it in a way which the user can see that we've won. So we're going to make all the letters go green. So to do this, we're going to need a for loop. So we'll do for integer I is equal to 0. I is smaller than word.length I plus plus. Then we'll do word container dot get component in children text mesh pro UGUI, and then again we'll want square brackets I to identify which one we're affecting, and then dot color, and of course we want to make it color dot green. So that is what we're going to do if we win. Now let's identify if we lose. Now I'm going to actually comment here, this is the win, just for later, because there is one thing we're going to add after. So now we're going to do if incorrect guesses equals hangman stages dot length. So if it's the length of the array hangman stages, if it of course gets to the max, then of course we've lost. Then what we're going to want to do is first comment here to tell us that it's the lose. And again we're going to want a for loop. So I'm just going to copy this one because it's going to be the same. And then instead of this, we're going to want color.red, because red will identify that it's lost. And I'm also now going to copy here up to the I, and I'm going to paste below. And then we'll do dot text equals word, and then brackets I dot toString. This is because if we've lost, we may not have all the letters shown because we may not have found them yet. So by doing this, it makes all the letters shown, and then it makes them all red. And therefore we can see exactly what the word was if we didn't originally know. So now let's create a function which will allow us to generate a random word based on our possible word list. So to do this, I'm going to go below the create button, and I'm going to do a private string, and I'm going to call this generate word. In this, we'll do a string, but this is going to be an array, and we'll call this word list. And we'll have this equal to possible word dot text dot split, and then in brackets and in quotations /n. Now /n means a new line, so this is essentially going to split the file by a new line, meaning we can have a word on one line, a word on another line, and if we do this, it will give us an array with just each word on both lines. So now let's do a string, and let's call that line, and we'll make this equal to word list, and then in square brackets random dot range, and then we want 0 to word list dot length -1, and then we'll finish this off with a semicolon. And then we're going to want to return this line. However, we're going to substring it 0 and then line dot length -1. This is because when we split it, it also does include this at the end, and of course we don't want a new line, because if we have a word in a new line, that's not going to be guessable, because we can't guess new line. So we're going to want to remove the new line by minusing it. And now we're going to create one final function. This is going to be called private void initialize game. In this, we're first going to have to reset the game if we're having a new round, and then after we're going to sort of set up the round. Before we do this, we're going to go back to our check outcome function, and where we've commented win, we're going to go under the for loop, and we're going to type invoke, and then we'll do in quotations initialize game, and then we're going to do a comma and 3F. This is a way of calling a function after a specific time delay. So this is going to wait 3 seconds and then it's going to call the initialize game function. Now I'm also going to copy this and I'm going to put it below the for loop in our lose function as well. The reason I'm not putting it below the win and lose is because otherwise it will invoke every single time we check the outcome. So now let's create our initialize game function. What we're first going to want to do is put a comment, and I'm just going to say this is where we're going to reset data back to original state. This is just for ease of access. So now I'm going to write incorrect guesses equals 0. Then of course correct guesses equals 0. And now we're going to need some for each loops. So first we'll do for each button child in button child in keyboard container dot get components in children button, and then of course open that up and we'll do child.interactable equals true. Now this is because of course earlier we need it so the button when it's pressed becomes interactable false. So if we're starting a new round, we of course want them all to go back to true so that we can use them again. So I'm going to create another for each loop now, and this for each loop is going to be for transform child in word container dot get component in children, and then of course we want to get the transform. Sorry, we want a brackets there. Here we're going to want to do destroy, and then we'll do child.gameObject. Finally, we're going to want a for each loop, and this is going to be for gameObject stage in Hangman stages. And we're going to want to do stage.setActive false. Now what this is doing is if we've played around and we've got the hangman and say we've got the body displayed, then this will make it so it hides it again, therefore resetting it back to its original state. So now let's do the generation part. So generate new word. Here we're going to want to do word equal to generate word, and then we'll do the brackets, and we're going to have this as .to upper. This is because the ASCII values we're doing in the check letter and the create button will be uppercase. So if we're comparing them to uppercase here, it makes it much easier for our validation. So finally, we're going to want another for each loop, and this is going to be for each character letter in our word. And then we'll do variable temp, and this is going to be equal to instantiate, and then in letter container in word container dot transform. Now the final thing we're going to want to do is go to our start function, and we're first going to want to initialize our buttons, and then we're going to initialize our game for the first time. Of course, all the other ones will be called in the check outcome here. So now let's go back to our project and start assigning these variables and then test if it works. Going back to our project, if we go to Hangman Manager, we will now see all these different objects. The first thing I'm going to do is open my canvas and open my Hangman container, and I'm going to press this little lock over in the right next to the inspector. By clicking this, I can now click stage 1, hold shift, and then click stage 6, therefore selecting all of them, and I can drag them all in one go to Hangman stages, and it will add them in order. Now I can uncheck this lock. The next thing I'm going to do is go back to Hangman Manager, and we want to do word container. Of course, this is going to be our word container in the sort of game here. We're also going to do the keyboard container. Next, we're going to want to do the letter container. Now that is down in our prefabs, so we'll drag that, and we'll want our keyboard button, which is our letter button. Now, we need one more thing. This is going to be our text asset. I've added this into my project. You can download that in my description, or you can make your own. Essentially, all it is a text document, so a .txt file with different words on different lines. If I open it, I can open it in Studio, and I can add new words. So say I want to add calculator. We've now got a new word which it can be. So if we go to our Hangman Manager, we can drag this word into our possible word, and there we've defined all the variables. So let's run our game and see what happens. If I click play, you'll notice the player disappears, and these all spawn with hashtags. So let's try and guess a word. So if we play the letter A, it wasn't something, so the head has appeared. Let's say we do M, or no, M wouldn't be anything, so let's do O. Again, nothing. E was a letter in it. So let's try D or C. We could try S or T, and none of them were it. It was ruler. Now if we wait 3 seconds, you can see it's restarted. So now let's try again. Let's play O, D, A, L, B, R, S, T. It was space. Again, we got it wrong. As you can see, I'm not very good at Hangman. So to check it's worked, I'm actually going to just get the text file so we can see what words it could be. So it's 3 letters, so let me try R, A, so it is rat. So if I put the T, it should be correct and it should go green. As you can see, it has now gone green. So that's how to make a Hangman game in Unity. Of course, you can change the assets, you can change the sizing on the keyboard to make it look nicer. So if I was to go here, I can make it so the font size is like 75. We can also remove the hashtag now. We can also go to letter container. We can also remove this hashtag. So now if I play the game, it looks a bit more presentable. Again, I can just guess random things. That was frog. But yeah, that is how you make a Unity Hangman game.